Sweet. Yeah, so thanks everybody for being here. Again, just like I said, we're going to be taking a vote to finalize the schedule for the unconf, and then kind of just having a general community hangout for 45 minutes or an hour. I guess it's linked in the agenda doc, the schedule for UnConf. So if you all are willing to go there, I can also post a link in the chat here. That is the schedule doc. And it just outlines the workshops and lightning talks that we all voted on after the last community call. I just put them into the schedule, and then people had some comments on when things should happen. So I moved them around, and let's see. One thing about the workshops that I wanted to ask a question about was, I think the defragmenting the community conversation is a pretty important one of like, where does all this stuff live? What are we going to call it? Who's going to maintain it? That sort of stuff. And it sort of applies to a number of the other workshops. So the wiki, the guidelines, the kind of the list of open bugs, and the 721 stamp as like potential community projects. I guess I was imagining we might do the defrag plus other conversations in part one, and then having those other possible community projects in part two, and moving those around. Does anybody have any objections to putting it that way? I was just thinking about this just before we started the call.
I don't think there's any problem with that. This is Stephen Edwards from Trailer Bits, by the way. I don't think there's any problem with that. The one concern I would have, having previously worked with OWASP, is that you want to make sure that there is a defined set of people owning things, defined accountability, and there's one place to go through for all of those things. The thing we very frequently see in OWASP is very small projects start quickly. There's a lot of fire behind them, and then no one is accountable, no one is responsible for them, and they very quickly flash, and there's nothing left of them. So right. I do think coming up with very defined processes for those, even if they are procedural, just like everyone coming in front of the group and saying, hey, I was thinking about this. Can I be owner on that? Can I have wiki space for that? I do think there should be a defined process for that going forward, so that there is an ownership process there.
And that's a great point. We actually have a process for the workshop groups. I think Kevin, if you could help share that, that'd be great.
Sure.
The idea is to, go through the derivation process of the problem and then the potential solution set. But the last thing would be to make sure that the working group has an owner and has people they held accountable and has metrics for success that we all can track as a group. I think that's a very important part of this process.
Yeah, that's perfect. Objective-based management is what you're going to need to do for these sorts of things, even if it's ad hoc. So it's perfect.
I actually wanted to add to that. I didn't have a chance to share yesterday with the people on the guidelines workshop, but plan to share that today. But one thing that we're hoping that people like is the very beginning is actually agree on just some really basic processes to continue the work that comes out of that workshop, namely meeting cadence and what platform. Just like, hey, okay, before we even begin, can we just agree to keep doing this in this workshop? So if people are up for that, I personally think that that's a great point to bring up. And maybe it should be something that should be in in all the workshops, depending on where it makes sense. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it should be absolutely part of the process. I was just starting to define some of these sections, so if Kevin can share that that workshop structure document that I had, we can start adding and refining that part of it's like part of it
in the chat.
Okay, cool. Yeah, on my phone, so I can't see it. But yeah, that would be a really great way to ensure that all the groups end up adopting some process where they say, you know, this is how you join the conversation. This is who's in charge. This is the measurable solutions that we're bringing to the table, and here's how we communicate future work.
Yeah, that is largely how we've structured the proposed workshop. Brian, I know you haven't had a chance to see that, but we'll sync up on that offline. But yeah, that's we think that's the way to go. Break it down into the parts and then kind of tackle them one at a time after the fact. So yeah.
Do we want to walk through that structure and go through the other parts of it too? Sort of loosely modeled on the RRCA process and, you know, just, you know, finding a root cause and stuff like that, Kanban. I don't know. There's a bunch of different buzzwords around there, but there's a few ideas distilled in there.
So, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, actually, if we're using RACI matrix, I'm pretty comfortable with that. But yeah. I do think having defined processes are in place and discussion around those is good. I apologize, Jared.
No problem. I don't think we've gone over this yet as a group, so it's still kind of new.
I think maybe just if sets aside just at the very, you know, a little bit of time at the beginning or something to just agree on, you know, okay, if you're taking part of this workshop, you know, define some sort of ownership and
do you think it works better at the beginning of the conversation or towards the end of the conversation and wrapping up?
I think it might depend on the workshop itself. You know, I think with the guideline stuff, you know, we're trying to sort of, the workshop at least that's being proposed is breaking down the priority of which guideline from a client's view is most important to tackle first, rather than deciding what the guideline is, but just which aspect in that sort of order, and then basing the meetings in cadence past that. So in that sense, I think it makes sense to agree on the meeting cadence at the beginning, but that's just within the context of our workshop. But other workshops may make sense. So I think it just depends.
Yeah, I saw going through the process of actually rigorously defining what the core problem is and how what people have worked on, because with the guidelines, there's been a few people working on different iterations of that. How, you know, what the actual problem is to solve before you go into the solutions. And I sort of just saw that naturally leading towards more discussion up front before you actually settle on, okay, we've talked for a good amount of time. Here, we're going to take the next 15 minutes and just talk about like how we're going to keep this conversation going, what the format is going to be like, and all that kind of stuff. I saw that more at the end.
Yeah, no. We'll chat after more on this, but the no decisions are to be made, at least in my opinion, should be made in the workshop, but just sort of get people in the mindset of, you know, these are decisions that will need to be made, kind of thing. And then when there's time for that specific section, you know, in a later meeting, then like let's bring in relative documents and stuff. Anyway, we can chat more about it. Anyone who wants to be part of the workshop, I invite you to be a part of that. I apologize.
Yeah, I agree that with no decisions will be made during these workshops, either beforehand or in person at the event. It's mostly about defining what the problem is, defining what the solutions can be, brainstorming as a group, and then keeping the conversation going. And I've seen, a few people start to work on this stuff, and I just hope that we follow the process of making sure we fundamentally understand what the problems are that we're solving and how to best solve them moving forward, before just going down a path of producing some work or something like that.
Yeah, I think maybe an exception to the making decisions at the unconf would be in this defrag conversation. Knowing where it's going to, is it going to be part of the Ethereum Foundation? Would they even be open to that? That might be some legwork I have to do beforehand. But are we going to have our own nonprofit org? Is it going to be called ETHSecurity or something else? Are these different projects that are happening through these working groups going to be housed under this potential org or not?
Yeah.
And at least having an idea of the direction we're going to be moving, I think will inform these other community type projects. And so just trying
I see it more for that specific one as coming up with the options, and we're going to have the 15-minute follow-up period after each hour-long discussion to kind of all talk as a group, is here's the three directions we can go in. Just let's take a quick vote right now. Which direction do you guys all want to go in? Or something like that. And we can do it online after the fact or something like that. It's more about brainstorming to me, those workshop periods.
When we're talking about the defrag one, yes. For the other ones, I think the crucial point that we need to figure out is the resource requirements, because the maintenance is arguably the number one. I think we've all agreed that that's the number one point of failure, is being able to maintain a project after the fact over a long period of time. And so when we're brainstorming the problem and solutions, really what we're trying to figure out is what are the resource requirements to make that happen over the long term.
That's a really great point.
And so, yes. And then figuring out, okay, these are the resource requirements. Now how are we going to make it happen? And that's ultimately, I think, where we want to end up on these workshops.
Yeah, I completely agree with the way all of this is going. The output of the workshops is a path forward, and the output of the defrag is how we coordinate the path forward and what are the resources that we need. If we come up with that, we can actually come up with something that can keep going, and a year and a half later, we'll be at a point at results on multiple working groups that we, that are still being maintained.
Cool. So I just switched the smart contract upgradability and the 721 stamp. It just include the 721 stamp and kind of the more community-based discussions in the second round.
Maybe. I mean, personally, I wanted to be a part of that, and we're going to be in the guidelines discussion, but
okay.
Yeah, up to the group.
Hi, everybody. This is Jacob. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I posted a message on a Telegram group inviting everybody who would like to discuss the assessment stamp workshop. Brian, if you want to give any input before the workshop, please direct message me, and I'll be happy to talk about it before the event.
Rex might be a better point of contact for that, because I know Rex and Roman, the other two people in the Secure Earth Guidelines thing that I'm a part of, are interested in pursuing that.
Yeah, that's our hacker project for the after the unconf. So definitely we want to talk.
Yeah, so you guys can follow up, and I've been on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And the more we will discuss before the workshop, I believe, the more it will be more valuable, really.
Cool.
If we just understand also who will participate, what are the expectations.
Yeah, that's the whole point of all of this.
Yeah, and just as a quick aside, are there defined outputs from these? I don't mean in terms of everyone has to deliver a report, but I mean in terms of where the actionable items will live. I know we're going to decide on how those things are for each workshop, but even having the global collection of those things in a single location would help people navigate those things. That's a huge thing we run into in OWASP.
I think, like you were saying, having an owner of that we can point to, like, email this person if you want to learn more or something like that. Contact this person.
We also have the ETHSecurity repo. So for the Wiki group, we started collecting resources, which I think a number of people in this group have submitted stuff for. We can also create, another repo for uncomp action items if you want, something like that.
And maybe that's the result, just a new project in the security repo, and that's where everything's going to be tracked or pointed to.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I actually had put forward one of the pull requests for adding Trail of Bits things to the resources there.
Yeah, we got it in there.
No, you did, and it was awesome. I'm actually happy to just say, going forward, the output of this will be a collection of those contacts and those things in the repo, so there's a single source that everyone can look to, and it's right there. It's very easily collected. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Using the ETHSecurity repo for the unconf outputs, and we may change it afterwards, but just so that everybody sort of knows where the place will be for this unconf, that I think we should agree on.
Yes.
And we'll introduce it at the top of the session right after lunch, introducing the workshop concept, and make sure that everyone puts something in there as an input.
There, I just created it, so it's up, and there's a link in the chat.
You're the man.
I think some of the outputs of these work groups, it also has something. It's also to some degree defined by the audience that it's going to. I mean, I know in the work groups it's all, ultimately it's auditors and within the security space. But the point of them are, different use cases, right? So the security stamp, for example, is technically not necessarily user facing, but a potential user of a particular platform facing. Guidelines could be argued as client facing. And so I think we need to think about, if we're going to be using, like, long term, we need to think about where these live that is actually accessible for the intended audience. And I think that is also kind of, within the context of ETHSecurity, I think it's also sort of goes into within the working groups themselves. So there's of course there's a few different people on different projects, security, and with the alliance, we're doing the alliance thing, and there's obviously the EF and ECF. We're trying to at least centralize some of that information, but we should also consider think of it more like networks. So if it's a centralized source of information, it can also point to a different, more specific repo for a particular. Whereas ETHSecurity, I think, should be the most general and just sort of have everything.
And that'll depend on the context of each topic, but this, ETHSecurity is supposed to be that centralizing force, that place you can go look to find the information, or at least the sources of information to go more further. And I think that's important. One of the meta conversation topics that are happening here is that we need one place to go look for things.
Yeah, and I think having that one place should be security. But if you're a client, you may not necessarily think to go to ETHSecurity. So I think it just depends on that. I think for most people, ETHSecurity is where they're going to be going. But then they're not going to need like a particular audience may not necessarily need the information regarding developer stuff or regarding the breakdown of tool sets. So I think it being sort of the the umbrella area makes a lot of sense. And then from there, we can start to think about the different audiences and how it sort of works within the community. Just because I know, coming from a design and communications background, even if we have it in one centralized location, it all depends on what's on that website that will define the audience for it. And it can then still fall into the same problems of where we're having, people having trouble finding the information they need, not because the information's not there, but because it's not tailored to the particular audience.
To the audience, yeah. I think that's a big thing. And just to piggyback on that with the resources workshop, that's one of the things that we're looking to, I think, figure out is, there's just a lot of information out there, like the Trail of Bits stuff in the consensus, like these repos have all of the information already online. So it really comes down to, how we structure all this for the audiences so that, things are easily maintainable. Obviously, Trail of Bits is going to maintain their repos. Consensus is also going to maintain their repos. So, the better that we can reference those from a central location, and then, the other, like the guidelines resources, like there will be owners to that and they'll maintain those. And the more that we can refer to these outside kind of people that own things, the easier we will be able to maintain the information, I think. Is probably going to be some of the key points that we figure out, and how we do that and structure it, like you said, for the audience, I think is important.
Any other thoughts?
No,
I have an agenda change suggestion.
Stephen, I think Stephen had a comment.
Yeah, no, I just was going to say, to Jared's point, I do think it's very good to have those contextually relevant purposes. I do think some of those will fall out naturally, but I do think it should be written, or there should be an eye placed on that, and that should maybe be called out as part of the assignments that people are doing there. There should be someone held accountable, not in terms of punishment, but just in terms of, we know who will be doing those things.
I mean, it's sometimes tough when we're dealing with decentralized communities, obviously, but I think trying to establish a few sort of quote unquote owners within the, for this type of information collecting, if you want to use that term for each workshop. I totally agree with that. That may be one group, that may be one company, that may be a collection of companies, but it's all within the context of ETHSecurity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Hey, Rex, did you have a suggestion?
Yeah.
Yes, on the 5th of September in the evening at 6 p.m., beers at Hopfenreich. We should put that in the agenda.
I agree. When is this? Sorry, on the 6th?
The Wednesday night. I think most of us will be there on the Wednesday night. So we, those that can, we try and gather. I think we won't have to do that much at the actual place for setup, because Bryant and I and Kevin are sort of helping with the setup. So we'll have the target to be done, and then we can have an informal beer meet before.
And most importantly, coffee the morning of.
Yeah, big time.
So Thursday, September 6th. Uncough, and then Wednesday, September 5th. Here's at, is it the same one as it's at the bottom, Hopfenreich?
Yep. We're okay with that, right, Brian?
I'm fine with it. That should be available.
No, but I meant the location.
What was the location again?
Hopefenreich, that's the place that takes Bitcoin?
I thought it was room 77.
Ah, so which one would you recommend?
Try both. Bar crawl. We could try all the bars. We're going to need at least a few bars for the after the unconf because there's just going to be so many people.
Yeah.
So I want to have a few places to point people to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Rex. Anything else regarding the unconf? Can we just do like a general thumbs up for the schedule, or does anybody have any objections? I guess maybe that's better. And then we can kind of share it out as the official schedule. Sure.
I just have a question. So with the workshop that we were kind of writing up, we were kind of making it sort of trying to get some people to have some ownership over the workshop coming out of it, as I mentioned. But we had structured it more like, would you be interested in continuing with this or something along those lines? Do we want, based on this conversation, do we want it to be a little bit more assumptive? Like if you're being a part of this workshop, you don't have to continue on, but we're suggesting to try and pitch in beyond the workshop that you participate in, or should we be suggesting that or no? Because I'm okay with letting people volunteer to be part of it or not, but I'm getting the sense that we're trying to really define ownership.
I would say we wouldn't assume anything. There will probably be a large number of people who are only looking. So let's say there's 15 people at the working group. Easily 10 of them might say, "Great idea. I'll keep an eye on it. I might put a little comment in there, but don't count on me for anything." So the goal for me was to get a core of volunteers that would be willing to follow through for each working group that it makes sense to follow through on. And if we can get that, then we're golden.
Yeah.
So then maybe we can just say we're looking for X number of volunteers. If come up to us after the workshop if you're really, really down to do it. Otherwise, if you're interested to stay a part of it, then so maybe it's somewhere in between.
I think enthusiasm is the best measure of continuing to work and support these different ideas. And by not assuming or asking for, X number of volunteers, whatever, you will get that number, but how many of them will actually be enthusiastic about participating? I think there's enough enthusiastic participants from the ownership perspective that won't be a problem. It'll be, how many more people do we need? Where do we need to go? And getting more buy-in from the room is a better way to scale that than to try to just get people to participate. But also some people are just looking for where they fit in and how they can make things better. So there's a give and take there, I think.
That's fair. Okay.
Yeah, my only concern, my sole concern is that if there's anything critical to a working group's success, that it is not relying on volunteers coming forward, that there is a defined owner of it. That's my only concern. I've seen it fail in multiple standards groups before. And I'm not trying to beat a horse to death here. It's just, I do want to see this succeed. I think there's a lot of really good ideas coming out of these groups and out of these working group sessions that we'll have. So I do want to just make sure that there is some sort of person that you can go to, even if you're an enthusiastic volunteer, who you can talk to about something, and continue that process, because that will help enormously as well.
The output of the working group is a very thin summary of like 4 or 5 slides, and I would say if you don't have a champion name on there from the group, it'll be tough for the thing to continue forward. So you would have a champion, and the champion might have a couple of names of volunteers, and then you go from there. You know, the ideal would be you've got 4 or 5 volunteers and a champion with 10 people who say, we'll watch it and we'll maybe make comments, but we're not going to contribute, and that would be great. But I think if you don't have a champion name, you don't have something going forward.
Yes, I think that's perfect, Rex.
Cool. And one thing that just summarized the previous point that we were talking about a couple minutes ago, I think while it is, you know, different information is going to live in different places, what the space really needs is like a read the docs for Ethereum and Ethereum security, because, you know, the people in my developer community that are new and want to learn the things don't really know where to go to get the information. And I think the meta purpose of this group is to try to collect all that information so it's easier to find and easier to use, so that it's easier to do security, because you don't have to go looking all over the place and doing hours and hours of research to find this information. So that was just one final point I wanted to make on that.
Cool. Well, sounds good, guys. Thanks for all the input. Anything else we want to talk about while we're here? Any big hacks or anything like that happening?
I mean, it's totally unrelated, but we're launching on, you know, hate to be a little bit of a shill here right now, but we're launching our beta net at the end of the month on mainnet. That's exciting, I guess, within the security space, but otherwise, no, I don't have anything for you, Kevin. Sorry.
Cool. No, it's fine. Doing a little bit of shilling is, I think, okay. Anybody else got anything to show?
I have a car that I want to sell.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, sweet guys. Thanks for being here. If we're all out of topics, I think that will do us for today.
Cool.
Oh, actually, you know what? One thing, maybe it would be good to set like, are we the structure of these workshops? Are we sharing the structure of the workshop to everyone beforehand, or does it depend on the workshop? I know, like, I was thinking of we were going to share our structure, but I've only seen, say, 1 or 2 in the in the Telegram chat thus far. Do we want it to be a bit of a surprise, or do we really care if there's any hard and fast rules around that?
The way I was picturing it is, so there's that doc on the structure, and there's going to be at least one person in the room from our organizers group that will be facilitating the conversation and trying to make sure we loosely follow the structure of actually defining problems, defining solutions, defining the work output, and all that kind of stuff, making sure all the major points get hit from a structural perspective. But any of these conversations that are happening beforehand, you know, ideally are coming up with great ideas to seed the conversation. In that, you know, hour is not really a long time, so it'd be great to seed that conversation and make sure that, like, you know, here's 5 things we thought of. Is there anything else? And, you know, nobody says anything, so you move on to the next topic. Or you know, in a larger group, you might get more ideas coming out. So I think there will be, you know, one person in the room from the organizers team that's facilitating the conversation from a structural perspective, and there will be other people in the room that will be facilitating from, you know, an ideas perspective and seating the room and all that kind of stuff. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was imagining these kind of initial conversations of the working groups to be figuring out what questions we're going to ask, and so we can kind of see that conversation, and then go through the process as a group, at the unconf. And so sharing it out, I think, is totally worthwhile, and probably a better case so that people can check things out and prepare beforehand if they wish to. I don't know how much of that engagement we'll get. So if it is a little bit more of a surprise, like, that's okay, because I think it's going to be, whether you share it out beforehand or not, it's going to be a surprise for the majority of people anyways. So yeah.
That's fair.
And we're going to have a conversation, 20-minute conversation prior to starting these sessions about, what the structure is and how we get the most out of these very short time periods together.
Something else unrelated I was reminded of through that discussion, though, somehow, is Chris at LivePeer is helping us get set up with video. So we'll be getting it. It's basically he's gonna help me set up the equipment, all that. It's gonna, right now, it'll just be on my laptop. We'll use a webcam off of it, but if anybody else wants to volunteer their laptop or anything,
or DSLR or something.
Yeah, but we'll be streaming on LivePeer, and then we'll get it recorded also, at least the lightning talk section.
Do we have a proper camera and mic to record?
Yeah, so if anybody has that, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'll be picking that up. I don't have one.
I've got like a podcast mic that I've used to record meetups in the past. It's probably better quality than just your laptop mic.
Yeah.
Probably not ideal, but it'll function.
Is it suspended?
It's one of those blue tech mics. It's
nice.
kind of like they're $150 or $200, and they're pretty good quality recordings. It's not like suspended from a like bungee cord, but it's up on a stand, and it's a decent.
I guess, would there be any issues with the latency or anything, do you think, or as far as like not syncing with the video?
Match it later.
VIP0, I heard, had some video problems, and they were streaming, and they had like proper nice cameras and mic as well. So we might want to take a little bit of time to look into that. We're certainly happy to help out. I'm not going to be in SF till actually after Berlin, but I can link up with the people on my team. But my concern is streaming. However, a good webcam and well placed mic, one of those sort of sit down, like ones that sit on your desk, podcasting ones, but that have a good range, should be enough. Definitely want to test it, but it'll be years 2048, and we'll still have AV problems.
Cool. But yeah, anything you guys think you might want to help with that? I'm probably not going to be pushing a lot of coordination on the video front, just other things. So anybody that wants to be proactive in that realm, let me know, and we'll keep it going. Otherwise, we'll just end up with what we have when we get there.
Cool.
I think we'll talk on the organizers chat and just to sort of coordinate on that also.
Perfect.
Sweet. Anything else anybody wants to add?
It's sunny outside. It's nice.
Yep, it's nice here too, but I'm sitting in a little box inside of a concrete building, so you win some, you lose some. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. I guess we will see you in a week and a half or a couple weeks from now in person.
Yep. In Berlin.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
See y'all.